You're watching Channel 13, KTRK TV, Houston. Live at 5 with Melanie Lawson and Alan Himberger. Now, live at 5.
For 51 days, the Davidian flag flew in defiance of an army of federal agents. But shortly after noon today, in a final act of defiance, the cult compound erupted in flames from the inside. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Live at 5. I'm Melanie Lawson. Federal authorities don't know if cult leader David Koresh was among those cult leaders who perished as that complex known as Mount Carmel went up in flames today. My colleague Alan Himberger, along with several other members of the Eyewitness News team, is on the scene covering this fiery and shocking end to that 51-day standoff. Alan, could anyone have anticipated this might have happened?
Melanie, that's a big question here this afternoon. No one could have anticipated that this would have happened. FBI told us quite a bit this afternoon about all the things that they had been going into making sure that an end like this wouldn't come about. They said they had spent many hours, hundreds of hours, talking to dozens of former cult members, making sure that a mass suicide pact was not in the plans. Unfortunately, here this afternoon, Waco is going to be remembered along with Jonestown. Exactly what happened. And let's bring in Wayne Del Ciofino, who began covering this thing from the very beginning. And Wayne, Melanie asked if anyone considered the ending that we saw here this afternoon. Some of us may have thought about it. We certainly prayed that it wouldn't come to this.
Well, for 51 days, Alan, we watched and we waited for this standoff that began with so much bloodshed to end in a quite different way. The FBI certainly wanted it to end peacefully. It was not to be. Instead, what we witnessed here this afternoon in the pasture land outside Waco was a deadly inferno fueled by lantern fuel. It was 3 minutes after high noon, the 51st day, and smoke was suddenly visible, swirling around the southwest corner of the compound. Seconds later, it was seeping through the roof of David Koresh's peach-colored throne, a prelude to the fiery Armageddon that would follow.
Here it goes, this place is going.
The flames leaped from two sides simultaneously, and what followed were dramatic inferno-like visions. There was more than one huge explosion, presumably the weapons cache the cultists were storing. For 30 minutes, it burned with ferocious intensity until the first sirens were heard. Fire trucks and ambulances were finally on their way to the compound, but it was too late. The fire was simply too large and too fast. Federal agents could only watch, like the rest of us, in helpless amazement, as the home to 96 men, women, and children, the religious temple for the Branch Davidians, was devoured by the flames. David Koresh had prophesied about a great fire, the end of the world. The FBI says it was a self-fulfilling one.
An FBI hostage rescue team member observed a subject through a window in the second floor wearing a black uniform and gas mask, undergoing a throwing motion. The person was knelt down with his hands cupped, from which a flame erupted. We always have regrets when human life is lost. What we do not regret is that we believe that this thing had to be brought to a logical conclusion at some point. He wanted to have as many people killed in that compound as possible. That is why it was named the Ranch Apocalypse.
Ranch Apocalypse, indeed. The FBI told us about an hour ago that the firefighters who arrived on the scene were kept back because of the fear of gunfire coming from the compound. Firemen, said the FBI spokesman Bob Ricks, are not paid to do this. Invisible from our cameras, though, Alan, apparently there was an act of heroism by one FBI agent who saw a woman, a member of the cult, run outside, engulfed in flames. He got out of his armored vehicle, not worried about taking gunfire, and struggled with her to the ground, even though she was trying to get back inside the building to save her.
Amazing stories coming out of this. What we now know is that there are 8 survivors, perhaps 9. Bob Ricks, the FBI agent in charge, was a little unclear about that in his afternoon press conference that you saw live on Channel 13 just about a half hour ago. 8 people he identified by name. He also talked about another black woman who was found, and they have not identified her yet. 4 of the injured with severe burns have been taken to San Antonio's Brooke Army Medical Center. Another 3 are up in Dallas, and there's another one here at Hillcrest Hospital. We'll get to Hillcrest Hospital in just a minute. Let's take you back to the beginning of this day, how it all began. Just around sunrise today at this satellite Satellite City, which is what the media calls its compound outside of the Branch Davidian compound out there. DPS came by and told many of the reporters and photographers that were here that perhaps that they might want to take some cover because the FBI was about to take the next step in this 51-day-long siege. The movement began at sunup. Combat engineer tanks began running into the sides of the compound buildings, poking big holes in them. What was going on? More than 4 hours later, the FBI described their activity.
The pounding of the compound that you see is really a necessary function of the insertion of gas. We're putting out 15 seconds, 15 different blasts of gas each time. That gas is dispersed over a 55-foot area. So it's not necessarily at this point one of destruction to the compound. At this point, we are gassing, and we will continue to gas.
Then we learned why the DPS had advised us to take cover.
It is estimated those inside the compound fired approximately 75 to 80 rounds during this initial volley. The FBI did not return fire.
The FBI said it would continue to gas the compound until the Davidians came out and surrendered.
At this point, we're not negotiating. We're saying come out. Come out with your hands up. This matter is over.
The question of Koresh and his followers committing mass suicide is one that has been asked of the FBI since the beginning of the siege. The FBI did not believe its tightening of the screws today would lead to that.
We thought that this was probably the best way to prevent that type of suicide pact from taking place. That is, caused confusion inside the compound. We have continually quizzed those coming out, and they, as a general rule, state that suicide, they believe, is not a possibility.
Now, we also ask about David Koresh. What has happened to David Koresh? The only thing that Bob Ricks could tell us, the FBI special agent in charge, is that they assume that David Koresh has perished in the Branch Davidian compound along with at least 80 other of his followers up there in the mass fire that we saw here live on Channel 13 just a couple of minutes after noon today. The survivors, at least 8, perhaps 9. Some have been hospitalized, at least 1 locally here in the Waco area at Hillcrest Baptist Hospital. Let's go live there right now to Channel 13 Eyewitness News reporter Chris Adams.
Well, Alan, the people here in Waco are reeling from the knowledge that scores of those who followed would-be Messiah David Koresh are dead now. But there are a number of doctors and nurses in this central Texas region who do not have the luxury of time to do that. They're trying to save those who are left. Waco's largest hospital had been on full alert for almost 2 hours before it saw its first cult casualty. She is a 30-year-old Davidian with first and second-degree burns over about 4% of her body.
I think, you know, I have to have some sense of being careful about this patient's privacy as well. But given that, I can certainly say that the burns were on her extremities, like her shoulders, her arms, her legs, and that they're not real severe burns.
It's clear those with severe burns were taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. This afternoon, choppers swooped over the facility and ferried at least 2 scorched Davidians to Parkland's burn center. At least 8 cult members survived, 2 critically injured and 4 others with lesser injuries. Those who lived through the infernal at Mount Carmel without injury are likely to face tough questioning by federal authorities at their command post at Texas State Technical College. On the streets of Waco, Mount Carmel is on everyone's mind.
Well, I hated it. They had to get to that point, you know, where they had the, you know, with the tear gas, and then the people ended up catching the place on fire.
I think the guy was insane, to tell you the truth about it. He didn't have no right to keeping them kids in there like he did.
Hillcrest Hospital has returned to normal status. They expect to get no more living Davidians. There is, however, one more grisly fact to report. The temporary morgue here is being readied. It's expected that they may yet receive the bodies of those who followed David Koresh to their deaths. Alan?
Okay, Chris Adams, thanks very much over at Hillcrest Baptist Hospital. What about the crime scene up there right now? Bob Ricks was a little ambiguous as to what the next step might be. They're still worried about some of the rounds, some of the ammunition, some of the explosives that are up at that compound still going off. That's why they're taking it very slowly and very, very meticulously. There are rounds, as he said, that are going off, firing off. They just don't, even though they're not coming through the barrel of a gun, that doesn't mean that they're not lethal if you're nearby when that round goes off. So they're being very, very cautious as they sweep their way through that compound. They indicate, Melanie, that it'll probably be tomorrow before they're able to sweep and do a real good sweep through that compound.
And Alan, at this point, of the 8 or 9 survivors, depending on how you count, none of them appear to be the children.
None appear very unfortunate. I mean, this, as a parent of 5 children, all the parents out there thinking of mostly the children. The adults in there hopefully were there, making up their own minds to be there. It's the children that really weighs heavily on me and a lot of other people around here tonight.
That's absolutely true. All right, Alan, we'll check back with you in just a minute. Well, watching this horrific ending to the cult standoff was certainly shocking for most people, but for those with loved ones inside, seeing that inferno was absolutely devastating. One woman who's kept a vigil throughout this standoff is Jean Hollup. She's the grandmother of David Koresh. Deborah Wrigley was with Mrs. Hollup this afternoon, and she joins us live with more on how she's feeling today. Deborah?
Melanie, we're outside the Hollup home in Northwest Houston. Mrs. Hollup, as you may recall, spent the past several weeks in Waco, hoping to speak to the grandson she knew as Vernon Howell. She returned to Houston yesterday to pay some bills. The fact that she's now home with friends and family may be for the best. When Jean Hollup saw the early morning commotion at the compound, she had a bad feeling.
It certainly don't look pretty, but I hope God takes care of them.
You'll be hearing a lot of stuff.
An hour after she said that, new hellish pictures began to be broadcast, and Koresh's grandmother and aunt began to cry.
God help me.
Throughout all this, Hollup has been an unwavering defender of a grandson she believes was misunderstood from the start. Even as reports emerged that cult members themselves set the inferno, she clung to that belief.
I don't, because he told them when he finished the 7 seals that he would bring them all out. They didn't wait till he finished them. Where are they? I've heard nothing about them finished. They've made fun of him. They've done nothing but make fun of him.
But no one's laughing now. Mrs. Hollup's attorney says that she will come outside to say something only if she receives a call that her grandson is still alive. That seems very unlikely at this point. Melanie, back to you.
All right, Deborah, thank you very much. And when we come back, how is Washington and Houston reacting to the dramatic ending in Waco? We'll talk to a religious expert about what a fiery end to the standoff meant to David Koresh. All that and more when Live at 5 continues.